Good evening. Today is Tuesday, October 27, 2020, and this is the beginning of the Board of Selectmen meeting. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Kemet, you want to read the announcements for us, please?
Oh, yes, Mr. Mitchell, I lost my place for a moment there.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay. The town of Hanson will continue to offer in-person early voting for the November 3rd presidential election at Town Hall, 542 Liberty Street, in the town clerk's office, ending Friday, October 30th. The hours for early voting at Town Hall will be as follows: Wednesday, October 28th, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Thursday, October 29th, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Friday, October 30th, 8:30 a.m. to 12 noon. And I might put in a little plug that I've gotten a lot of feedback from people that have done the early voting in person, and they are saying that the town clerk's office is on the money and doing a fantastic job, and it's very stress-free. So think about that if you're not feeling comfortable doing it in person or mailing it in. The state presidential election is Tuesday, November 3rd, and if you don't know that, I don't know where you've been, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Hanson Middle School. The police department will host a blood drive at the station, 775 Main Street, on Friday, October 30th from 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and Saturday, October 31st from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. For an appointment on Friday, log on to tinyurl.com/Hanson POL October 30th, and for Saturday, a similar thing. I think your best bet would probably just to go on the Hanson Police website, and they'll have that information, or call 617-632-3206. Appointments are recommended, but walk-ins will be taken as time allows. We do have various openings on various committees, but the lovely and talented Greer Getson is in the process of updating those, so we don't want to mention any that may not be available. Best bet is always to go out on our town website, hanson-ma.gov, and check out the employment/volunteer tab, and we do try to keep that updated. Upcoming meetings: Board of Selectmen, November 17th, 2020, Board of Selectmen, December 8th, 2020, and Board of Selectmen, December 15th, 2020. And that is it, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Okay, first up under new business is fiscal year 21 tax classification public hearing pursuant to MGLC 4056. So we have Lee. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to the 2021 classification hearing. And I want to start by introducing our Board of Assessors. We have Patricia O'Kane and Ina McDonough. Kathy Keefe is also a chairman of our board, but she had a previous commitment tonight, so she wasn't able to make it. Also wanted to introduce my administrator assistant, Denise Alexander. Like everybody knows me, we've done this, we've gone through this a few times now.
Yep.
Does anybody need a handout? Everything is going to be listed. Everything's going to be presented here on the screen, but if anybody needs a handout, I have handouts also. So we will start. So this evening we are gathered here. There are required actions by the Board of Selectmen to get our classification hearing settled and to submit our stuff, our figures and everything to the Department of Local Services, Department of Revenue, so that a tax rate can be set. The first order tonight would be on page, it's on page 2, and it's the selecting of the residential factor. This has to do with whether Hanson would split the tax rate or if we would leave a uniform tax rate for all classes of property, the residential, the commercial, the industrial, and the personal property. There are a few scenarios. If you look on page 3, it just gives you what the different shifts would be if you had decided to shift the tax rate and have a split tax rate. There's different percentages that you could vote to have that shift. The Board of Assessors on their meeting on October 19th, they voted to not recommend shifting the burden to the commercial. They recommend a uniform tax rate, just because we have so little commercial property that we don't want to put the extra burden on them. So your first order tonight would be to vote to vote on a factor of 1, which would mean that we would not shift that tax rate. We would keep a uniform tax rate.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor? 5-0.
Okay, the pages 3, 4, 5, these are just different scenarios that shows you the difference that it would be for the split. On page 4 is our pie chart that just shows you that Hanson has a huge residential amount of, it's 92%. The commercial, industrial, and personal property only make up 8% of our properties. So it certainly makes sense not to split that tax rate. Page 5, it just gives you, again, the tax amounts with if we were to split the tax rates there also. So those are just informational. Let's see. On page 7, it's just a 3-year comparison for the values in the town of Hanson. As you can see from fiscal 19, 2021, our values consistently continue to go up. This year in the residential alone, we had over a 4% increase on the average single-family value. Condos were up about 4.3%, and the commercial were up about 3.2%. So we are continuing, and we're still seeing the trend with the valuations rising in the town of Hanson.
And, excuse me, this comes up frequently with keyboard warriors, where people seem to think that you can just arbitrarily assess a property and that you guys somehow just decide you're going to inflate the property values and that type of thing. But my understanding is that there's some framework that you need to work within that is set by the state, and that it's fairly rigorous in terms of what you must follow.
Yes.
So, can you just speak a little bit to that, and without any great detail, which I know is kind of a Herculean task for you?
Well, we have to be we track the sales from, sometimes it's 2 prior years, sometimes it's a year, depending on how many sales we have. We have to be within a 5% percentage of 100% valuation on these properties, so it is a rigorous process that we go through. We do make adjustments yearly, so that when the 5th year certification year comes up, the taxpayers aren't getting hit hugely in that 5th year. So we do it in increments as we see the sales prices rise. Everything is certified by the Department of Revenue. We're not just slapping values on things, and I know I see some of that talk, but when people call our office, we walk them through it, and once they get the understanding of it,
Well, that's really the best bet, Lee, is if somebody's got a question, or if they're concerned, or they think it wasn't done accurately, just reach out to you guys and you'll...
Right, we'll walk them through the whole process. We'll show them, what's happening with the sales and the valuations in the town of Hanson. Hanson is a very popular place to be right now. I think the whole South Shore is, but Hanson is very desirable.
Thank you.
And so then we move on to page 8, and this is the second order for vote this evening, and this has to do with the residential tax exemption. The residential tax exemption is for property owners of Class 1 residential property who own and occupy their property. It's a percent that is applied to the dollar amount value that is exempted from taxation. We typically see this in cities and towns where there is a high rate of rental property. Hanson is mostly residential, live-in homes. We don't have, we do have rental property, but we don't have a huge amount. So to shift the burden on those rental properties would, again, not be suggested to do. The Board of Assessors also recommends to not adopt that residential tax exemption. So this is your second vote this evening.
I move that Hanson not opt to adopt the residential tax exemption.
So moved. A second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0, Greer.
Okay. The next order, the third action for the Board of Selectmen to vote on is the small commercial exemption. This has to do with legislation from 1994. It was an option to the property tax classification law, and it is the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen to decide whether or not to adopt the small commercial exemption. The adoption of this provision does not guarantee the reduction in taxes to the small business. And examples of this would be if there was a plaza that was under $1 million and each business there had 10 or less employees. It's not actually the businesses in that complex that would benefit from this. It would be the property owner who would get the exemption. So it doesn't really trickle down to the business owners. Hanson did have 57 businesses that would qualify for that small commercial exemption if they were under $1 million and if they owned and occupied the property. Hanson has 91 home occupations. They do not qualify for this exemption. 41 of the businesses out of the businesses that are in the town of Hanson do not own the property, so they would not benefit. So we have about 16 businesses that would benefit for that small commercial exemption. Again, to shift the burden on the others would be more of a hardship on them. So the Board of Assessors also votes to not recommend the small commercial exemption. So that is your third vote.
I move Hanson opt not to adopt the small commercial exemption.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0.
Okay, now I have to notify the Board of Selectmen of the excess levy capacity for the 2021 year, and that's at $88,310.60. That is not anything that you have to take a vote on. It's just my responsibility to let you know what that is. I do have to have signatures on the LA5, so I am going to pass that around. That's going to be submitted. Signing that. I just want to, on behalf of the Board of Assessors, myself, Denise, we just want to thank the financial team here in the town of Hanson, Todd Hassett, Gene Sullivan. It's a well-oiled machine. We work very well together. We get the job done, and I'm grateful to be part of that team.
Well, we want to thank you and the Board of Assessors for all of your excellent work.
So the last action this evening would vote to close the classification hearing for 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0.
Very good. Thank
Lee,
you so
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
You guys have quite the setup too, by the way. Pretty sharp.
We're trying to get better and better every year. Trying to make it a little more exciting. And it should go down on its own. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up under new business. Town Accountant Todd Hassick, first quarterly update. Todd, you wanna come up to the podium, or you can do it right, just totally, yeah, you have a microphone right there, you can do it from right there, if you're more comfortable, that's fine with us, perfect,
Oh, thanks. I don't want to be too relaxed.
you deserve it.
Thank you. So you should have in your meeting packet a 5-page handout that our office prepared earlier in the month. And I'll just quickly walk the board through. Again, this is reviewing the first quarter of the fiscal year, which started July 1st. It's typically the part of the year where we know the least, certainly as we get into the winter and things that might happen that impact public works or public safety. There may be more interesting things for us to discuss later in the year. But, and I would just point out to the board that this particular exhibit occurred before our fall special town meeting. So the town did take additional action as relates to our budget and capital plan, which will be reflected on the next report. And also, this is prior to the setting of the tax rate, but using our best estimate as of early October. So the first page, just reviewing the general fund results through the first quarter. I would just point out to the board at the bottom of the budget, the first column, you'll notice there's a positive, or the appearance of a surplus of $121,000. These funds were voted at the October 3rd special town meeting as part of the budget supplement article that the town meeting approved, and the town meeting also authorized $25,000 to be added to our other post-employment benefits trust for future employee benefit or retiree benefits. So when you see the next report from me, this will show a balanced budget with no shortfall and no surplus. And that's just because of the timing of our fall town meeting. With respect to the actuals, I just want to point out a few things. You know, as you can see, we're tracking very similarly on the revenue side to where we were tracking at this time a year ago. I just want to point out a couple of things. We have had some pretty strong permit activity this year coming out, with the building department, so that may be a nice sign for not only permit revenue going forward, but also new growth, new tax revenues a year or so out from now. With respect to the investment income, rates are significantly less today than they were a year ago, so this is one area where we're starting to see a bit of a decline or reduction. We did enjoy some over the last couple of years, some better returns. And also other revenue, which is very minor here. We did have last year, you'll see we were almost at budget through the first quarter, and that was the result of some legal reimbursements, primarily to do with sale of town property. We also did have a small storm reimbursement for some participation our public safety people had from a prior year. So that was an anomaly that happened last year that we don't expect to recur. Other than that, we're early, as you know, the motor excise, which is a large part of our local receipts, doesn't really gear up until February, March. That's more on a calendar year basis, if you will. So this time of year, we typically don't see, we're only at 8%, just under 8%. but we'll have a much better indication in February in terms of how car sales have possibly changed in the past year. And that will be a big indicator for us going forward as we have a lot of challenges in FY '22, as you know. On the expense side, I'll just highlight a couple of things. In the public safety area, we're tracking well at this point. We do have some concerns about fire department overtime, which John and I are monitoring with the fire chief. We did, as you know, the town did receive a multi-year grant to assist us with the regional dispatch program. So that's a 6-figure grant that's really helped us in '21, starting in '21, and it goes out multiple years, and that will really be a huge help to us in terms of our budgeting going forward the next couple of years.
And excuse me, Todd, is
Sure.
any of the fire line eligible for CARES Act reimbursement?
What we're looking at is the need for some shift coverage that has not been caused by the
Okay,
COVID-19.
all right, yep.
Yeah. But we should have more information for the board by January, I think. Some of it's anticipated versus actual at this point, but I just wanted to alert the board that's an area that we have some concerns over. The human service area, again, it's a modest part of our budget, but our veterans benefits, we are starting to see a bit of an increase there to assist some of our Hanson veterans. That possibly will need a modest supplement or transfer later in the year. Right now, we're tracking a slightly higher than budget. With respect to employee benefits and insurance, again, the percentage looks large through the first quarter, but I would just remind the board that this line includes our share of the county pension assessment, which is paid in full on July 1st at the beginning of the year. So that sort of skews what you would expect to see if you'd expect to see us at 25 or 30%. We're at 62%, but again, that's driven by the front-loaded pension assessment. We do have the option, as you know, to make semi-annual payments for the pension assessment, which was helpful years ago when cash flow was an issue, but there's an 8% interest added on if we were to pay half July 1 and half January 1, and given the way interest rates are, it doesn't make any sense, but just so you know, that's an option that the town makes each year. And then in terms of debt service, you'll notice we're tracking much higher this year, at this point in the year, than we were a year ago. That's primarily a function of two things. We did have a couple of short-term notes we've done pay downs on. One was for the McQuon Street design work, and the other was for the fire engine that was purchased a year ago, or maybe less now. In addition, we did refund some debt for the police station, which is excluded debt. So we had an interest payment. The payments were realigned as part of the bond sale we did last fall, which was primarily for water projects, as you'll recall. But we did take the opportunity at the time to refund the police station and yield some savings for the taxpayers. That's debt excluded costs, so that did yield some savings for the taxpayers. And I would point out, just sort of back to our tax discussion with the assessors, there are several debt items that the taxpayers pay additional tax, have approved, the voters have approved to pay additional taxes for. The regional high school, our share, the regional school technology, and I just want to point out this year in '21 we're making the final payment for that, so that we'll see a reduction to the impact on the property taxpayers going forward there.
Final payment on the technology?
The technology,
yeah,
yes.
Okay.
The regional high school, I believe, is payable through fiscal '28. And the police station is 26, or vice versa. So I think the police station is through FY '26, so we still have 5 more years on that. But the refunding did save, from memory, over $30,000 a year going forward for the remainder of the maturity of that. So at this point, I don't really have any major concerns for the general fund. And again, we'll keep the board updated as things progress. The next page is how the water fund is doing, and they have, as you know, their budget increased substantially this year. The commission did vote a rather large rate increase in order to cover their costs. Much of this related to the debt service for the water tank repair for the mains and the new meter system.
And what was that increase, and when will that hit?
The increase in the budget, from memory, was about 16% overall. I think the rate increase they approved was 20%, and it should be reflected in the bills that we just got their first round of commitments earlier in October, so the ratepayers should be seeing it now.
So the last bill that they just got?
I believe so,
Okay.
because
Because there was quite a bit of controversy around that. Around people getting their bills thinking that it had increased, but then we got word from the water department or certain members of the water commission that they had not increased the rate yet, that it was going to hit maybe in January, and that the increase in people's bills might actually have been because of new meters that were installed, and so, you know, there seemed to be a lot of controversy around that. Okay, so I guess maybe.
I'll clarify that for you. Certainly as part of the tax rate approval process, now that you've taken your votes, Lee and I will work with the Department of Revenue. We have been provided documentation from the Water Department to support the large increase in the estimated water revenue. So the budget's up 16% for the year. So we'll see. And the commitment that I did see for this month, whether it had a rate increase or not, was a bit higher than we've had. So maybe, as you say, it's the new meters and maybe the readings are getting.
The Water Commission is telling me that people are using, because their homes,
yeah, that's true.
usage is so high,
sure,
you know, so
sure,
maybe that's
true.
part of it too.
Maybe that's part of
Yeah.
it, so that may save the day this year. So they're tracking pretty well. Again, you'll notice their debt expense is at 15%, where a year ago we didn't show any, because their payments were scheduled in a different way. But all the new debt, we've made an initial interest payment, and the principal will be due later, I think in January. So that's just, reflecting the new water debt coming on effective this year. They have a healthy surplus. It's just over $1 million. And they've only asked town meeting to utilize $70,000 of it to date, which was for the purchase of a truck. But they do have, as you know, some large capital needs on the horizon. So I don't think that's the last rate increase our ratepayers are going to see in the next few years. Next page, the Recreation Enterprise Fund. This is probably the area of most concern from a financial standpoint. As you know, they were not able to open, and their programs have, a lot of their programs have been deferred, or events have been pushed back. We've refunded a number of events that might have happened this past summer, or they've been pushed forward. We've reduced their estimated revenue substantially from prior year $219,000 budget to $142,000 this year.
And I'm sorry, Todd, when somebody has given us money but they push it out, are we recognizing it as income this year, or we're going to push it into the year in which it's realized?
When it's earned, yeah,
Okay,
when it's
all right.
realized, yep.
Yep.
We do escrow. That's a great question. We also have an escrow account for them which we fully account for based on all their contractual obligations. So someone might put a deposit for a wedding or some other event, and we've we're holding that in a separate account, not recognize it until the wedding or event happens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yep. And we've got, you'll notice there's $172,000 of transfers in. This is subsidy from the general fund. It's not all operating. 87,000 of this is an operating fund subsidy because of the loss of revenue, which we're hoping, doesn't get worse in the spring. But this is certainly an area we've really got to keep a good eye on the revenue side. And they've been real careful about their expenses to date. There's two capital items for $85,000 that are part of that transfer in for improvements at the lodge, wiring and,
Didn't they have something with the stove or?
yeah, the stove, thank you.
ventilation.
Yeah. And then at the fall town meeting we had, which is after this report date, we did contribute another $20,000 for stump removal through an article at the October town meeting. So this is probably the area at this point in the year I'm most concerned about, and it's the question of to what extent they'll be open and we'll see revenue in the back half of the year. So this may require some sort of additional action to get them through the year. We'll keep you advised as things play out. The fourth page is a summary of our transfer station operation. Again, this we are anticipating changes to the contract mid-year, and we did initially vote $176,000 general fund subsidy to be added to the $197,000 of estimated revenue to cover their $373,000 budget. Again, to date, we're tracking okay, but we're going to have to see how the new rates impact us starting in January. Town meeting in October, after this report date, did approve through a general fund contribution the purchase of $55,000 for new compactors.
Yeah.
So that will really help us mitigate some of the built-in costs of that new contract, which had rentals of these compactors, which would have like a 2-year buyback in the case of us buying it up front. So I think that was a good move the town made. So again, this is kind of stay tuned too. Let's see how this is more on the expense side than the revenue side. We'll just have to monitor this and keep the board apprised, and hope that we don't need to supplement in any way. Both this and the recreation enterprise have very modest retained earnings. So there's not a lot of ability for them to sort of cover their loss of revenue or increase in expense, like they had more flexibility in prior years. But in the last 2 years, as you know, we've had to both subsidize more and draw on their retained earnings to fund the operations. Lastly is a long listing of all of the open general fund articles. And this includes articles from prior years that are still active. It includes articles that were voted at both the annual and special town meetings we had in late July. What it does not show are the votes that were taken of course, at the October 3rd town meeting. That will be reflected on the next report you see. But just to remind the board, at the October town meeting, we did vote about another $750,000 of projects.
Now, Todd, the obvious question is, we've got some things here from 2012. For instance, I'm just pulling this one arbitrarily.
Sure.
Remediate algae growth on Oldham Pond. Well, if we have not used that money since 2012 to remediate the algae growth on Oldham Pond, then I would say that the algae's probably growing on Oldham Pond, and the money's sitting here and not being used for other things.
Right, right.
So what's our process to kind of vet this? and-
So what the administration has done is, recently, we've reached out to all of the departments to say, not only review what you have still open, but we want you to report to us the plan, or if, in the case of your example, Oldham Pond, the funds are no longer needed, let's repurpose these before we use free cash or taxation or some other source. So this listing you have, the 925,000, just over $500,000 of it relates to projects that are ongoing at within the regional school district. I can tell you that since this report was done, the only major thing that has been expended or purchased is within the highway department, they have purchased a new chipper. And that price came in at $47,500 against the $50,000 appropriation. But in large measure, a lot of these things, to your point, Laura, some of them certainly I think can be closed or repurposed by town meeting. I did go through a process with the regional schools over the summer. So what you see here, they did certify to me were all active ongoing projects. So we expect, they typically once or twice a year will submit reimbursement documentation to us. But we did close a few at the end of the year and repurpose, as you know, at the fall to October 3rd town meeting, we did repurpose 84,000 actually under the regional high school, the item roadway repairs, 84,378. That got repurposed a few weeks ago.
All right, so you guys are on it, you're working with the departments, because, you know, we're up against it, we need every penny we
That's
can
right.
get. So if this money isn't gonna be used for the
That's
prior
right.
intended purpose, then let's get it back into the cash flow.
Agreed. So, yeah, I believe we're on it. And with that, that was all I wanted to just review with you. Again, we're early in the year. But there are a few things on the radar that we'll keep the board apprised of as they develop.
So Todd, at what point should we start talking about next year? January?
We should talk before January.
Before January,
in my
okay.
view. Yeah. So we've issued initial budget guidelines, and initial department budgets are due back to us, I believe, November 20th. So we could do something as early December. We could do, you know, certainly conversationally something prior to that, but
Okay.
and
I think we
that.
should definitely do that.
Yeah, no, it's, we can't avoid what's coming.
No,
It's,
I'd
yeah,
say it's an elephant in the room, but it's actually bigger than that, so I don't know what that is. but-
yeah, yep.
Does anybody else have any questions for Todd?
No, excellent, thank you, Todd.
My
All
pleasure,
right, Todd, thank you very much. We
My
appreciate your
pleasure.
time.
of course.
Okay, next up. The right of first refusal, 485 Winter Street.
Was
Can
Miss-
somebody
more
get,
Mr. Clemens and Mr. Skellinger gonna come in? How timely.
How you doing, gentlemen?
We are well, I am well, Frank, you well? I'm well.
Okay, so we have this property at 485 Winter Street in Hanson, and it looks like the town of Hanson has the first right of refusal on this property. So we got a letter from the sellers, and it looks like they have a purchase and sales on this property. So it looks like from emails from you two gentlemen this week, or last week rather, it looks like it's you guys' opinion that we should try to consider purchasing this property. If I'm not mistaken, right?
Right, exercise that right of first refusal instead of passing on that right.
Right.
And we have 90 days to do that, right? Or at least that's what they're saying in their letter, so I'm assuming that they're being accurate about it.
That's correct under the Chapter 61 laws.
And so if we decided to exercise our right of first refusal, we obviously don't have that money at the ready right now. So what is that process?
Well, Frank and I have spent some time discussing, we haven't reached an endpoint or a final set of thoughts on it. It's true that the 90-day window offered by the Chapter 61 laws is much shorter than most processes for finding cash unless one is independently wealthy, which this town is not, and most people are not. So I don't have a quick answer. I will say this, out in the wide world where these things are talked about, what is sometimes done, and again, it depends on knowing the right people, a town can delegate its right of first refusal to someone, let's say like a land trust.
Okay,
With the
like Wildlands
understanding that the land
Trust.
trust will not permanently own it,
Okay,
but they would,
yeah.
it would be conveyed to them with the understanding or agreement in writing somewhere that then later be conveyed to the town when the nickels and dimes are all lined up.
Okay.
Have not had that kind of conversation with either the Wildlands Trust or anyone else on this. I can say it might not be all that likely because I don't think the Wildlands Trust has enormous reserves, that sort of thing. And it's, but there may be other possible ways to look at it. If you're going to look at CPC funds, I think we all know that that's a multi-step process.
Yeah.
Where the early part can be done relatively promptly, a month here, a month there, a couple months. But the latter parts, when you get to preparing something for the selection level and then the town meeting level, so many months have gone by, the 90 days has gone by.
Right.
I do not know what all the options are. It may be that town council or someone else can help us identify them.
Well,
Mr. Clements,
conveniently,
yeah,
Kate is here.
excuse me, please, through me, please. I'd like, Kate, please, to chime in on this, please. And I know Kate has very, very little information on this, so.
Yeah, so Kenny sprung this on me by text when I was driving over here. So this is winging it a little bit. But I have done chapter land purchases in others, so in other towns. So the exercising the right of first refusal is just really a vote of the Board of Selectmen. So you can exercise it and then you essentially mirror the terms of the purchase and sale agreement. It provided it's a legitimate purchase, yes, with, market rate and all of that. But then typically we've been in the situation where you wait till town meeting to close because you don't have the funding. Phil's absolutely right that you can delegate, your option to another trust and then they could convey it back. That's another possibility. But typically, if you want to exercise your right of first refusal, we can reach out to the lawyers, we'll figure out the timing, let them know when the town meeting is, but that piece falls into place, generally speaking. I mean, the timing here is bad because we just had the town meeting, and we're not gonna be there till May. But exercising the right is only a vote of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
But does the seller, do they have to wait? So if we do that example that you just said, can the seller say, no, it's 90 days, I want my money either from the town or?
Oh, it's because they challenge
Yeah.
approach.
Because what if they say, you know what, we need the money right now for certain reasons.
They might need
and we
it.
want to close in 90 days, we'll sell it to you, but if you can't close in 90 days, we're gonna exercise our right on the existing purchase and sales.
So that's the piece, Kenny, that I'm not 100% sure on. And like I said, I didn't know, but I can look that up. Give you the whole process, give you the time frame, the timing, and to see if we're in that boundary. I think it's like you've got the 90 days to exercise the right of first refusal and then a certain amount of time to close. But I just don't know those things off the top of my head.
And and because it was designated as vacant property, they will owe back taxes as though it were residential for the period of time that it was designated as, but also, again, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Clements, is this property, in your estimation, and I realize that this is a loaded question, is this something that can be built on? Because what I'm hearing you say is it's primarily wetlands based on where it is, and it's, you know,
I'd like to pass this around, if I
I think we have it in our.
may. You don't have it, I have it.
Oh, okay.
But, Mr. Chairman, with your permission,
Yes,
that's,
absolutely.
I don't necessarily need that back, but it's,
Oh, boy.
But that is a good question, if you wanna answer that. In your opinion, obviously, we know you don't know the final.
I think that if anyone came to conservation tomorrow with a notice of intent to do anything on that, beyond build, as I said, the kind of a wood duck house, we would look at them and we would say, sure you wanna spend the money on this process? Because the answer is going to be no. It's wetland, and the buffer zones, which could include, it's hard to find any buffer zone there. Whatever may have been there in the past was so small and so simple and so frankly primitive, no house these days would ever be proposed, even by the most modest of all personal incomes. To build a house there now, and I'm speaking to conservation and invite our agent to offer his opinions, I see no way. That doesn't mean it has zero value,
Right.
but if it was 8 acres of upland, you know, would you sort of estimate what the value would be, and it was not what we're talking about here right now.
So, Mr. Clemens, in your opinion, what would a buyer do with this property?
Depends on how well informed the buyer is. I don't know anything about any discussion between any buyer in this situation and seller. I do know that a couple of years ago, when we were between agents, and I was on the commission at the time, I actually had a direct voice-to-voice conversation with the son of the two owners, who was assisting the owners with different things. And at one time, there was a for sale sign on the street in front of it. Both I and the office person at that time tried to diplomatically, without dictating anything, explain to that person on behalf of his family that it would be very, very difficult to consider any sort of construction on it. And it was a cordial conversation, but that was it. That was probably a couple of years ago.
Oh, but so that's my concern. So I've got the reason I'm asking, because obviously that's gonna drive the valuation of the property, whether it's buildable or not. And I'd really hate to see somebody enter into this who, as you said, is maybe not really aware of what the regulations are, and maybe they're just thinking, I can build anywhere I want, and they're not aware of the wetlands regulations, and so they end up entering into this, thinking that it's okay, but they're gonna have trouble. And to your point of discussing it with their son, based on the purchase and sales agreement, I'd say their son is still quite involved in this process, in that he is listed, I believe, it's the same last name as the broker. So you know, the reason I bring this up is I'm just wondering if, yes, to your point, Kenny, of the timing, so we've got the 90-day right of refusal, we've got to respond, but I'm wondering if part of the conversation is, if we vote that we want to do it, yes, we realize that this is protracting the sale of this property, but we need to be real with you. If you really look at this property, and we're not making a determination because it hasn't come before us, but just reasonable people looking at this and looking at where it's located would surmise that it is quite wet and highly unlikely to be able to have anything built, and you're gonna end up maybe selling a piece of property to somebody who is not gonna be real happy when they find out they're not able to do much on it.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, there's examples all across the state, probably much further, where different things are entered into by people with different levels of awareness or different levels of, shall we say, daring to try this or that. And what I would hope wouldn't happen with this is a sale or conveyance with someone else planning to apply for things and have the town in it, what we call, I'll just be polite, I put it on the phone, permit Hades. Because if someone comes up with a plan and they present it to a board or a couple of boards, you know, for septic, construction, this and that, and it takes up resources, the board's time and effort, and the staff has to spend hours on it, the engineer is paid to spend, you end up, and if you end up with something which can't be done, or during the decision process, adversarial, I think it is not prudent, really, for anyone in that picture to be spending their time and money and sort of labor on those kinds of things. One way to prevent that is to have it not be conveyed to anyone who would develop it, but rather someone who, for different values, that you may not think about every day, but natural resource values, which I tabulated on my little handout, go that route.
See,
Well, I think, can I interject here? So remember, you're not here to protect this buyer.
Granted, yeah,
Right.
yes.
So, so I wouldn't want anyone to think that we're preventing a transaction from going forward. The question is really whether or not the town has interest in buying the property, and if the town feels that this is fair market value, so a bona fide offer.
Yes.
And thus worth spending the money. If it's unbuildable, it's unbuildable and the value is what it is.
Well, how do we get to that bona fide? So how do we, if, let's say, again, hypothetically, we decide we want to exercise the right of first refusal, but knowing what Mr. Clements has just said, that really it isn't a buildable lot, perhaps the value is much less than what has been offered in this contract, but we don't yet have a third independent party telling us what it's worth. How do we get to that?
Yeah, so the funny thing is I don't know which chapter it's under, but any chapter land, you essentially, the obligation in exercising the right of first refusal is to match the purchase and sale agreement, provided we can't say it's like, the brother and they're just putting in a bogus offer to jack up the price, provided it's a bona fide offer, you have to match the price. Where you get appraisals and things like that is if you're just taking it out of chapter and say it was farmland and you decide, well, I want to develop this, so you're not selling it right now, then you get an appraisal because at that point you don't have a purchase and sales agreement. So you're sort of stuck where you are. I mean, you can make the argument that it's not a price that's justified and see where that goes, but they're gonna go with the higher number.
Mr. Chair, if I could say, we've had some informal discussions with the Board of Assessors about this property. And a couple things, Lee told us that it looks like it's a bona fide purchase and sales agreement. She looked at it. And she also looked carefully at what the value of the property was and what tax is being paid on it right now. The assessed value, having applied the Chapter 61 formula, which reduces by 3/4 the value, is around 19 something. And if you do the math and say take it out of Chapter 61, it brings you back up to actually a little bit north of what the asking price is here. The other thing is, and maybe Dr. Skellinger could just mention what he has observed, which is over the last couple of years, the property has been on the market. The price has been steadily decreasing. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the assessors keep track of that, and it started out at $175,000 2 years ago, and it's been dropped about a half a dozen times to the current price of $85,000, and then this offer was kept at $65,000. So they clearly know that it's not worth as much as they thought it would.
I mean, I really would love to have the town exercise its right of first refusal, but I can't justify paying the amount of money that they've made the offer for. So I don't know, do we just roll the dice and say, you know what, we eventually thinking that, somebody's gonna try to build, they're not gonna be able to build, that they're gonna, I don't know, I don't know if we roll the dice or, I mean, how critical is this property to you guys?
Well, there is something else which I couldn't answer on it, but yes, it will. It is actually a piece of what we call the Little Cedar Swamp, in which the town already owns most of. And this would pretty nearly complete the picture.
Yeah.
It's circled there. On the west side of that is the large parcel where the middle school, Hanson Middle School sits. But between the middle school and this parcel, there's several others. There's 2 that are conservation, there's several others that are municipally owned, but not dedicated to anything. If one was going to, say, commit oneself to protecting natural resources for floodwater control and just general management, prevention of abuse, this is probably kind of wet for putting in trails. but for biodiversity and for the sort of maintaining a headwaters area so that that stream that flows through it to Indian Head Brook would be protected, kept clean, and you know, the volume would be as much as it could be. In other words, just manage it for its natural resource value. It's nice to have one overall management mindset. Right now, it's still a little bit of a hodgepodge. I think it might be responsible, it would be responsible to move towards the point where you have a sizable resource area under a single management entity and proceed into the future that way. Right now, it's not quite like that. I mean, conservation, if we're going to do anything, well, we a little piece here, a little piece there. It's the more it's chopped up like that, the less of a priority it can be made. You know, for us, it's just not worth the effort.
So I think the bigger issue is how we're gonna pay for this property. I mean, I think that we all would agree if we have the opportunity to purchase it, but how do we pay for it? Yep, CPC is definitely, you know, an option, but CPC is not gonna give us 100%. Either way, no matter what we do, if we have interest in this, we have to go to town meeting. And we already know what town meeting's gonna look like in next May. And I just think, I totally understand where you guys are coming from. In fact, I agree with it, but I just think unfortunately, the timing is just bad. I mean, I'd like to hear what the rest of the board, but can you imagine going to town meeting, you know, to get an override of, you know, over 6 figures, and then, oh yeah, by the way, we're gonna purchase this property here, you know, to put into conservation. I think that becomes a bigger issue.
We think. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I was gonna go around quickly and see what they think. What do you guys think?
As far as I'm concerned, the entire east side of Winter Street is developed, every lot. And basically that entire stretch, the west side of Winter Street, is the Little Cedar Swamp and completely undeveloped. It seems to me that you protecting this one piece of property will have negligible value on the swamp, on the watershed into Indian Head Brook. It's like, it would be nice, but I mean, I'm saying no. I'm voting against this because I think for $65,000, I'd rather roll the dice and say, if someone actually wants to buy that piece of property for 65, well, let them buyer beware. I mean, it is what Kate just said, it is not our job to protect them. I mean, personally, I've walked, that's where our middle school is. I've spent quality time knee-deep with 6th graders trudging through all that, and they loved it. But there's nothing out there that you could possibly build on. So it's like, I hope no one's gonna buy this land without looking at it and saying, holy mackerel, it's really a swamp. And Hanson has plenty of swamp that is already protected. It's like there's one little parcel, $65,000 is a teacher's salary. And at this point, I'm not willing to sacrifice a teacher's salary for a piece of land that no one is going to have much of a chance of doing anything with anyway. Maybe in time, they won't be able to sell it at all, and they'll just surrender to the inevitable.
Mr. Hickey?
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna need some leeway on this.
Sure, go ahead.
Because it's not just this piece of property I'm thinking about, it's others in the future.
Yep.
And I'm gonna ask Todd a question, and I already know the answer, so then I will say, why? Will be my second question to Todd. And my question is this board, since 2017, has raised over $400,000 in tax title properties. You know that, and it went right into the general fund. So my question is basically, why? If something like this comes up in the future, we don't have the money, even if we were to vote for it. So it's not just this piece of property. I'm asking you, why does the money that we get from other properties, why can't that go into a separate fund for properties in the future? Where we wouldn't have to, you know, come up with $65,000.
So there are different types of sales that the town makes. So when it's a tax title, those taxes originally were levied to pay for a budget, for an operating budget, to support it. We have sold property as recently as June 30th, town-owned, and those proceeds have been set aside. They're available for the town to use as a source of funds to put into another piece of real estate. So we just had proceeds of $81,000 this summer
From Zero Liberty.
from Zero Liberty.
Yeah.
And prior to that, we've had some parcels around the old Plymouth County Hospital property. Those are not in the general fund. They're reserved for a future town meeting. It's called Sale of Real Estate Fund.
Okay.
So it depends on this, how the town acquired, whether it was through a lien or a purchase. But we do have funds that could be used for this purpose if, the board and the town wanted to. As recent as the $81,000, but there's additional funds. I don't have the figure with me.
But that wouldn't be additional taxes, this is
No.
money we already have.
We already have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to, we actually have the money.
Yes, sir.
But I
Yes, sir.
agree with Wes, for me, it's really priced for the town to take on that burden.
Hold on, I wanna go to the board. Mr. Dyer.
So it was actually interesting that this property did come up, because this past spring, a few of us in this room, did the municipal vulnerability planning workshop, where we looked at a map of Hanson. We said, what are our vulnerabilities here in the town of Hanson? And we talked about climate change, we talked about flooding, and we said, what are some assets in the town of Hanson? We talked about the Little Cedar Swamp, and we said, what are some possibilities in the future? And I was at the table with Phil, and I remember we said, this is a possibility to secure these wetlands for the future. So we can have a carbon sink to help us mitigate carbon. And then also we talked about flooding and water quality. And as we talk about all these really important qualities of life that we all enjoy, if you drink water, you're an environmentalist. If you breathe air, you're an environmentalist. And for $65,000 to make sure that we can piecemeal together what we can to make sure that we have clean water, clean air, habitat, and all the other benefits that come from conservation land, I think that's just a drop in the bucket to the overall project of making sure that we have a habitable planet for our future. So I would say if we can make any moves on this, let's try to make some moves on this. And with the 90-day period, it's a short period of time for a municipality to kind of move, right? So I think if we can have a conversations with the owners and say, will you be willing to work with us if we can get you the asking price? Let's see if we can do that and make sure we move, and try that. Yeah, that's what I'll say with that.
Okay.
I like everything Mr. Dyer had to say, and I guess I would say, given the information that Todd just said, which is that we've got some money, and knowing that this is absolutely CPC eligible, 100%, I might suggest to the board, because I don't want to presume that the Community Preservation Committee would vote to support this at our next town meeting, but I might propose to the board that perhaps we ask Community Preservation to take it under advisement. We've got 90 days, and to let us know whether they feel as though they would be able to support this at the next town meeting. And if we get a positive read, then we know, to your point, Mr. Mitchell, as you know, having been on Community Preservations, one of the requirements typically is that some other source of money is contributed to this. I think Todd's source might fit that bill, so that CPC is not 100% paying for it, and we can get a read from them. So I think we can do it without any increased taxes. Agree it's a tough year, but it's never going to be a good year to try to save a piece of property that's in such a key place. And I really respect Mr. Scalinger and Mr. Clemens, and if they're coming to us and telling us that they think this is an important piece of property, which they do not do about every piece of property that comes to them, we get quite a few pieces of property that are offered, and they do not come to, before this board, that I want to support the work that they're doing. And I agree with Mr. Dyer that, you know, once this land is sold and used or whatever, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. So that's all.
So
I've got
why
to
don't we
say.
do this? Kate, can you reach out to the seller?
Yep,
I want to table the vote until the next meeting.
Yes.
Because I'm literally on the fence,
yep,
so I'd like to get more information.
yes.
So if you could talk to the seller and see if, you know, if something's even possible. Because
Yeah.
the seller may say no, and it's the end of the discussion.
And I'll
Did you want
figure
us
out
to talk to
if
CPC?
locking it in just locks us in until the
Right.
next appropriating possibility.
And then the second thing is,
Yeah.
is to talk to CPC to see if it's possible.
Yeah.
And then we'll put it on for 2 weeks for a vote. I don't wanna make a vote tonight. Let's get more information.
All right.
Is that acceptable to you guys? Mr. Bloss, good.
Yep, so who's going to present this to CPC?
You wanna do that?
Well,
Mr.
Mr. Clemens is, you're on CPC still, aren't you,
Yes,
sir?
I am.
Yes.
And-
Do you know when you guys are meeting again?
Yes, the second week in November. And I
Second,
think there's
okay.
plenty of time to add this to the agenda.
Okay, so if you could do
Dr.
that.
Hickey has already indicated that would be the date, and
Right.
the agenda is.
Yeah, so if you could do that, and then we'll have Kate reach out to the sellers, we'll get some more information, we'll put it back on the agenda for a vote, in a couple weeks,
The 17th
17th,
of November.
all right?
Phil, your meeting is gonna be the week of the 10th?
I believe so, I don't think in my calendar here, but early in, I don't think it's I don't think it's next week, but I think whatever the second Wednesday is of November.
That's the 11th, and it's Veterans Day.
Oh, okay, in that case, maybe.
So we can set the date
But
after your
sometime-
meeting.
Yeah,
We'll
but
get 90 days.
that
Yes.
is something that can be known very soon, and I'll share that information.
Okay, all right, is, any more questions, Mr. Hickey?
Ken, we could just do it on December 8th, if, you know.
Yeah, that's
okay.
fine. I don't think we have to set a date now, once we know that he's already talked to him and Kate, and then we can just add it on the agenda, and,
Cool.
and go from there.
And Greer or John, one of you will send me the letter and the PNS.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think I already sent it to you.
Oh,
Um,
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate your time.
I was having trouble with my email.
All right.
I sent it to you.
Greer,
Bill,
Oh, thank you.
invite Mr. Sedalian.
yeah, we could, yeah, he can, if he's out there, absolutely. So, it's nice enough for him to wait.
I have it here, that's,
oh, okay. I'll take a hard.
remember she had problems with her email?
Yeah, I checked my junk though, so I don't know. It's weird.
Mr. Cadali, how are you, sir?
Good, sir, how's it going?
Good, good. Thank you for coming. And, most importantly, thank you for, applying for these, positions.
Sure, appreciate it. Yeah, I think you might know the background. I expressed my interest to, contribute to the town and the community. So as part of my interest, I reached out to Greer. All right, I don't know the faces, sorry.
It's nice to put a name to the face, right?
Yeah, sort of. At least half face. So I expressed my interest to Greer, and she helped me to connect with John. Hi, John. So yeah, I'm here.
That's great.
His wife as well, the veteran?
Yes,
Officer?
Is Tim here?
No, he's
Oh.
not here.
Yeah, I did get a chance to talk with him.
So does anybody have any questions for Mr. Cadali? And hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yep, that's good.
No, I mean, we're thrilled that you've stepped up, and I guess we'll have to get our Economic Development Committee going, because now we've actually got members.
I actually got an email from somebody on economic last week, that just got sworn in, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we
Well,
talked
good.
about that on the phone.
All right, so if there's no more, if there's no.
Question. So
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Mr. Guy.
So, you'd like to be on Cultural Council, Economic Development, Memorial Day, Patriotic Observance, all three committees?
No, I just showed interest in those
Okay.
committees,
Oh,
and then
oh.
after my conversation yesterday, I understood that there's actually more need in the economic development
Yes.
than the others. So
Yeah.
I think I'll probably start with that.
That'd be great.
That's great. So
Thank you.
I move
Thank you
that
for the
we
clarification.
appoint Mr. Kodali to the Economic Development Committee.
So moved. Second, sorry.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0.
Thank you
Again,
so much.
thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it.
That's just the mission, and then who else is on
Okay, perfect.
Oh, and then,
Thank you.
Nice talking
Hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you.
actually, should you tell him to go get sworn in?
Oh, sir, you'll have to go in at some point to the clerk's, actually, you probably email her.
Yeah.
Maybe after the election.
Okay,
That might be a good tip. And you'll have to just get sworn in before you can sit in the committee.
will do.
Okay?
All right.
Thank you. And it's free, too. Okay, next up, vote to support the reinstatement of the funding for the North River Commission. Mr. Stanbrook.
We received a letter, which I'm trying to find right now, for the, from the North River Commission, and it was asking us to support, I guess the state usually has someone patrolling the river on a part-time basis and on a boat to enforcing the rules, and because the river doesn't really, it crosses 6 town boundaries, no single town has total jurisdiction over it. So this is an email from Samantha Woods, and then a sample letter that the town of Marshfield sent to the governor asking to put that funding back into the budget. Right now it's been taken out. There was a $30,000 budget amount that had been in there for the last 10 years, and it's been taken out of the budget for fiscal year 21. And this is a letter of support to reinstate that back into the state budget.
So you're just looking for a motion to have you write a letter on behalf of the board asking to reinstate the North River Commission money?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor? 5-0. All right, send them a letter, John, when you get a chance.
Yes.
Next up, the town administrator's report. Mr. Stanbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on some old business, on Monday, the 19th last week, Plymouth County had another Zoom meeting to announce a new round of funding from the Federal CARES Act funds. The county released a new Phase 5 of funding with a 12/30/20, December 30th submission date deadline, and it allows costs not reimbursed yet to be rolled over into the new round. So that was some good news. The new amount of funding released was based on population again. They've done that in the last couple of rounds. And the new allotment for Hanson is $190,639.41, which brings our total allotment to $1.6 million. So we have until December 30th to figure out COVID-related costs of $190,000. And new business, today I sent out the fiscal year 22 budget message. Mr. Hassett alluded a little bit to it in his remarks today. I sent out the budget message and the capital improvement paperwork for departments to fill out and return by Friday, November 20th. The directions for the budget are a level service budget, and that means providing the level of services that you provide now at next year's costs. And then a 2% cost of living adjustment for wages, which doesn't mean that everyone's getting a 2% cost of living adjustment, but I'd like to see what that is. I'd like to model what that would be. Plus any required contractual step or pay increases. So if you have a contract that says that you're supposed to get an 3% raise in your contract, obviously you have to put that in. It's a contractual thing we have to do. Also a 0% increase in all discretionary expense line items. And a request for only the bare essential articles to be submitted for the upcoming May town meeting, given the financial situation we're likely to be in. And Mr. Hassett and I will be meeting with department heads in December to go over the budget, flesh out any anomalies that we see, and then answer any questions that I might have so that I can be fully versed on where we are in the first budget go-around. Also in department head evaluations, I'll be completing the department head evaluations as I meet with everyone after the fiscal year 22 budget meetings, so I'm trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, try to speed up the process. And I do look forward to speaking with everyone as we move through the evaluations, and I should have all the department head evaluations done by the end of December. Sorry, go ahead.
We have still not done Mr. Stanbrook's evaluation from July, and now we're coming up to December. His contract and the Town Administrator Act both say that we need to do his evaluation, so just, can we put a pin in that to just think about getting that rolling? All right, thanks, John, sorry, that just
That's
reminded
okay.
me.
Just on COVID-19, the town's been a red community for the past 2 weeks on the map that the Department of Public Health has been putting out. If we're a red community for 3 weeks in a row, we'll have to revert from Phase 3, Step 2 to Phase 3, Step 1 on the governor's orders chart. He has a chart of what you can do in each step and phase. Again, the South Shore seems to be a hot spot for virus activity at the moment. Again, please, I'm gonna say it again, everyone's heard it, but it doesn't seem to be getting through, or something, it's just not happening. Please remember to do the basic things to stop the virus, including social distancing, frequent hand washing, and getting tested if you're feeling ill or if you have the symptoms of the virus. And looks like we're gonna have to bend the curve again as we did in the spring to keep this virus in check. Just on Veterans Day, due to the heightened situation with COVID, I've been talking to Veterans Agent Tim White, and he also has been speaking with Council on Aging Director Mary Collins, and they both don't feel comfortable conducting any type of large ceremony of Veterans Day, for Veterans Day. Mary Collins is planning to deliver some cards and gift certificates to area veterans with the Council on Aging van. And Veterans Agent Tim White is still working on some sort of memorial observance on a very small scale, but there won't be any large public observance of Veterans Day this year. I'd just like to thank personally each and every veteran for their service. And on this upcoming Remembrance Day, I urge everyone to remember our veterans and their sacrifice and service.
Excuse me, and I, of course, echo those sentiments, but when Todd was going through the budget, he mentioned, and I may have misunderstood what he was saying, but it seemed to me as though he said that Tim is either anticipating or already has seen an increase in services that are needed, and I'm wondering, as a board, is there something we need to do to get him more resources? Because we know that as this thing upticks and people's finances get more stressed out, I want to make sure we're taking care of our veterans and that Tim's got the resources he needs. Have you got a line on that, or?
So that's exactly what Todd was talking about, that he has seen an uptick, not a surge, but an uptick in veterans assistance needed. We'll almost certainly make it till the May town meeting for any,
Okay.
but there may be a chance that we have to put supplemental appropriation to that in May. If we can't make it to May, we could always go to the reserve fund of the finance committee. That's what the reserve fund is for unanticipated costs. So we could go to the reserve fund transfer method and go to the finance committee and ask for, they have $100,000, so we could take some of the money from there and put that towards the budget if we weren't going to make it till May.
I just didn't want Tim to feel like we weren't, and I'm not suggesting you would do this or Todd would do this, but I just want to make sure he's feeling supported, because I know he's up against it, so.
Yes, there's a lot of need out there, and it's getting worse, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I wish that wasn't so, but it is. So, yes, there is a way to get, if he needs money before May, we could go the reserve fund transfer route. If he needs money in May, it'll likely be a budget supplement at a special town meeting in May.
All right, thanks.
And then finally, I'd just like to urge everyone to please come out and vote, like Ms. Fitzgerald Carmen was saying earlier. If you don't know that there's an election coming, that you don't know where you've been, please come out and vote. Don't let others make decisions for you. Come out and vote. That's all I can say. Vote, vote, vote. And then upcoming attractions, the next meeting is November 17th. That'll be a continuation of the Impressed LLC Cannabis Manufacturing and Cultivation Public Hearing. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Steenberg. Okay, we will now, excuse me, we will now convene an executive session not to return to open session at the conclusion of executive session. Looking for a motion to go into executive session to discuss the complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. We are now